Okay, so you've been working on value scales with me and probably wondering why. What is the purpose? So today, using our cone, our sphere, and our cube, we're going to begin by taking a photo after we've set up a still life. So these are my objects, my cone, my sphere, and my cube. When I set up my still life, I want to make sure that they are overlapping so that I can see things that are in front and things that are behind. So if I were to stack them like so, I'm beginning to get the idea of overlapping, but all of my depth is being shown more as height. If I were to create something like this, I have things that are in front, such as the sphere, things that are behind, such as the cone and the cube, and they start to create interest and movement in my picture. Move those out of the way so I can continue looking at them. When I set up a still life, all of my objects sit in place and they never move until I'm done drawing. Again, we can take a photo with our iPad and it will freeze that image as is and would be a great place for us to continue to. And we wouldn't have to worry about shadows changing or any of the placement of the objects changing. Now, with my objects in place, I'm going to start drawing the first thing I see, that item that is closest to me. So in my view, I'll bring this down, the item that is closest to me is my sphere. This is the closest item to me. The next closest item is my cube, and the furthest item is my cone. So I'm going to start with my sphere because that is the object that I see in its entirety. Then I can start to layer behind, adding those other objects. Okay, using my safety compass, I am going to draw my cube. When I use my safety compass, this area spins. This area has holes to create different size circles. I'm going to place this down on my paper and I'm going to select a size and begin drawing. I can go back and forth, always keeping my pencil point in the same hole. And in doing that, I create a perfect circle. Now I've got that step complete. I've just drawn my sphere, only it looks like a circle. It does not look like a ball yet. Behind my ball was my cube. So as I begin to draw my cube, I'm going to start to look at the angles of the different lines. So here, this line is the closest line, the closest part of the cube as it comes towards me. So that's the line I'm going to begin drawing. My next line is going to be this one here, and then this one that moves back. Okay, so looking at the placement of my objects, I'm going to start checking those lines. Using the side of my safety compass as a ruler, I'm going to begin drawing all of my lines. I like to kind of try and line things up and look at the angles, get an idea of the way those lines are moving, either away from me or towards other objects. Now, with these edges in place, I can start to create the faces or the flat surfaces of my cube by working with parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that run in the same direction, side by side. They never touch, they never overlap. So if I line the edge of my ruler up here and I slide it, keeping that continuous angle all the way back here, then I get this side, creating the face or the front. If I line my ruler up here and slide this down to the bottom, I get the bottom edge of my cube. Notice I'm not drawing on top of my sphere because my sphere is in front. Line this up here, slide it back, line it up here, pulling it down to this edge, here, move across. And up here. And connect. And now I have a cube. I can get rid of these little tails. And then I can move on to my cone. Again, my cone, I'm gonna line my pencil up, I'm gonna look at the angles, try and get the angle to be accurate. And my cone is resting on the edge of this sphere. It's tipping down. It overlaps. Something like this. The edges or the top surfaces are round, so I'm going to create an oval to create the top edge. Using that, I can get the remainder of my cone drawn. The base is round. I want to look at the way that it curves. It's curving away from me. And then I want to get that in place. Now here where they overlap, I want to get rid of the part of the cube that I still see, because if the cone is on top, I no longer see it. So if we look at the still life, and then at my drawing, hopefully I have something that is similar. Now, once these objects are in place, I'm ready to start adding value. Remember, value is that gradual change from light to dark or dark to light, and we use it so that we can give the illusion that a 2D drawing has depth and is becoming three-dimensional. I'm going to start with the ball or the sphere. My light source is coming in this direction for me. My brightest spot of my ball is right in this area. My darkest edge is going to be down here. So I'm going to start with the darker edge. And now that I've drawn, one thing that I like to do is get rid of this sharp point and just kind of lose the tip so it's easier to work with creating value. I like to hold my pencil sideways, and I start to get my darker surface in on my sphere. Notice as I do this, I'm following the shape, the round curve of the sphere as I'm adding the value in. As it comes around, I start to lighten it. As it fills in, I start to lighten it, always making note that this area here is where my light is coming from, making this my lightest surface. Again, working, continuing to work around the object. My object is round. The lines and the directions that I create as I apply my value need to be round. Now, once I start to get value in place, I can always come in with my finger, and I like to smooth and blend and really get a nice transition from light to dark. As I do that, I start to notice different areas start to blend and become similar. So I can always come in and I can intensify areas or darken the values. And my goal is to have at least 5 different values throughout my sphere so that it begins to look 3D. And the more I continue to add, the more I blend, and the more I come in and add those highlights in, my sphere starts to take shape. From here, I can start to move on to the other items. Again, my light source is coming from this direction, so it is hitting my cone right here, making this the lightest part. This is the underside, which means it's going to be the darkest. However, because my light source is coming in this angle, this edge is not going to be the lightest. It's going to be my medium value within my cone. Again, my cone is round, so I want to begin by creating these curvatures, these round lines, following the shape of the base, following the shape of the top of it. And I'm just going to work kind of quick, coming in, blending down off of this edge, getting a medium value in there. Come in on the bottom, and I want to do the same thing, only this is the darkest edge is in here. So I'm going to work with a much darker value as I pull it in and curve it around. I can always give myself these guidelines following that curvature so that I continue creating that shape as I add that value in here. Next, I'm going to move into my cube and continue to work with value. This edge is my darkest edge. Again, my light's coming in this way. The light's not going to wrap around here very well. So this is going to be my darkest side. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to almost color this in just to get my base value in here. This side moves away, so notice that I'm pushing away from these edges as I shade, because these subtle lines will trick the mind and create that illusion of that movement, further enhancing the nature of 3D value within the objects. I want to always keep crisp lines so I can come in, I can clean them up. I don't want any straggles in here. I'm going to come and work with the face. The face is going to be my lightest. Again, getting that base value within this area. I can smooth it out, flatten it out a little bit. And then because of the light source, my ball or sphere is casting a shadow in this range. I'm going to create that shadow behind my ball into this area. If I need to separate a little more, I can darken the curvature of my sphere to further push and separate the ball from the cube. My top surface is going to be my midpoint value, my medium value. So again, getting that base layer in there, trying to get a nice even tone. You can come in and smooth this out to get a nice solid shade happening. Clean up these smudges here. And then my cone actually casts a bit of a shadow onto my cube. So if I come in here, I'm going to kind of mark the shape. Something like this. And then I can darken this to create that shadow. And then as you look at it, you'll see these are very, very close in here. So I need to work with separation. As I'm looking at this, I can see a little bit of a reflection happening underneath here. So with my eraser, right along that edge, I'm going to create that reflection underneath. And just that subtle little line is going to give me the separation. So at this point, I have a wide variety of value beginning to happen. I'm starting to get separation and movement within my picture. I can tell that the ball is in front. I can tell that this is laying on top based on the shadow being cast. And I can tell that this side is moving away from me. To continue, I would also work with shadows. So looking at the placement of my light coming in through here on the side, the placement of my objects, and the shadows being cast on my table, I want to start to create that shadow underneath my objects. Again, I can even it out. Shadows typically are one color. They have a very clean edge, just like our object. This cone, this shadow is casting and coming all the way through the back here. And then my cube is starting to be softened and rounded as the shadow starts to disappear. Again, in this area, I want to create separation. I want to make sure we can tell where my cube is resting. And so this is where I start to work with my value. It's always going to be darkest where it touches the surface, and it can have a gradual change as it moves upward. And so this is in working with those value scale worksheets where that value scale is going to apply. Now we're not going to go all the way to our lightest, but we're going to start with our darkest value and go to about that third or fourth range within that value scale. I can always come back and darken, so I like to start a little bit lighter than I think I need to be, because it's much easier to darken it than it is to lighten it. Again, clean up these edges, make sure these lines are nice and neat. I can blend them, I can bring my value down, I can bring my value up, blending it and trying to get a subtle change within there. This shadow, I'm going to darken the surface. Continue to darken this shadow here. And this shadow curves around on here, and it also curves back around underneath the sphere. And people often think that the shadow needs to be the darkest thing in a drawing. That is not true. The shadow does not always have to be the darkest. It just needs to be identifiable as a shadow, and it needs to show that separation. So my sphere is creating two shadows. It changes when it hits the table from when it hits the sphere. And I can continue to work and to push this value. At this point, I'm pretty confident in this drawing. I'm pretty comfortable with it. I do notice a few areas that I would like to clean up. The lines in here, I feel like my cone looks a little bit sloppy. My sphere, I think, is looking pretty well rounded. And I'm happy with the way that my cube is looking. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop here. Go ahead and gather your supplies. Feel free to use the back of your paper to practice. The safety compass is one of those things that we sometimes struggle with. Remember, press your finger onto this metal, find any hole in the orange part, and we just bring it back and forth, around and around. These don't work very well if we don't hold the center. Look at that mess. If I hold the center and I want a small circle, I can do this. But look at the size. It's not going to make sense for our drawing. So feel free to practice with it. And the rest of the time is yours to have fun creating your 3D form drawing.